Hello, whoever's tuned in. I'm gonna be watching this video from Audio University. I'm not sure, and I don't know if I've ever seen this channel before, but it's called Debunking the Digital Audio Myth, the Truth About the Stair-Step Effect. And if you don't know what this is, when you're doing an analog to digital conversion, so I don't know how many steps back we want to go, we listen to digital music at this point. We record our music, do a lot of the editing digitally, and then convert it back to analog for us to hear, at your earbuds or your speakers, whatever's doing the conversion back to what your actual speakers can use. And when you do sampling, you're actually taking pictures of the sound. That's one way to put it. I know. You're taking pictures of the sound at a certain number of times. Like for CD, that's 44,100 times a second. And the way they represent that is often with these kind of stair steps. You turn this waveform, when you sample it at different places, you end up just saying how loud is it at this part. That's your level over time. Maybe there's let's see if there's another one. Let's go to images. So here's another good one. Picture of what you're looking at. It might be better to represent these as the lollipop style. Here we go. Here's a lollipop. See how it's just a point there? There's no real connector between them. And we probably watched stuff like by Monty before. That's setting up a precedent. But let's just play this. So, debunking the digital audio myth, the truth about the stair-step effect.
Are you ready to shatter some of your beliefs about digital audio? Because I'm about to show you a video that reveals the truth about the digital stair-step myth and proves that 16-bit 44.1 kilohertz audio playback is just as good as high-res formats, if not better. I know this goes against what many experts out there are saying, but you're about to see the evidence.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So at the minimum, and many people disagree that this is even possible at this minimum, that it needs to be a lot higher, you have to take 44,100 pictures of a sound every second in order to make it sound real. Your eyes, movies are like 24 or whatever, but some are 30 frames per second, I think, for TV, or 29.97. Your eyes only need like 25 pictures a second to think they're looking at the real world, So it's amazing how sensitive our ears are compared to our eyes in that sort of data acquisition. Think about that, 24, 25, 30 frames a second, or, these newer cameras, like 60 frames per second, right? 60 pictures per second compared to 44,100. It's nuts how different our eyes and ears are. Also, he just made the claim that, let me see how exactly he said it.
If not better. I know this 1 kilohertz digital stair-step myth and proves that 16-bit 44.1 kilohertz audio playback is just as good as high-res formats, if not better. I know this goes against what many experts out there are saying.
Okay, just right off the bat. Yeah, have you ever seen that, those pictures of what you actually see when you look at a brick wall versus what your mind puts in? And there's an experiment where you can actually place pictures in the blind spots of your eyes, and you won't see them. It's pretty neat, and that's right in front of you too. It's not off to the side or something. It's where your optic nerves attach or something. But what he just said was that 16-bit 44K is as good or better than high-res formats. I don't think you can say that when you're doing a lot of volume changes. Like 16-bit, 24-bit is probably enough ever, unless you're just doing crazy ups and downs. If we really want to get stuck on it, I can make a pathological file where I can show that I could bring up quantization noise to an audible level using 16-bit audio without dithering and moving up and down a lot of volume changes. And then also with the sample rate, 44.1 should be enough for us to hear everything that we can actually hear, but you have to deal with anti-aliasing filters. And so that, Dan Lavery thinks that should be more like 60 kilohertz to give you a wide range to run an anti-aliasing filter. If you don't know, aliasing will put back in some noise that didn't get encoded properly because it was too fast for the sampling rate. Well, it usually happens though when we're actually manipulating signals digitally, like in a compressor or amplifier modeler, because we're making a lot of nonlinear effects that have a lot of insanely high frequencies coming out. Not stuff that we can hear, but because of the way digital audio works, those higher frequencies get aliased back into the part that we can hear, the pass band, and to make some trouble. So I'm right off the bat, I'm a little bit worried about this. I understand in theory, yes, they proved back in the 20s, like Shannon Nyquist or whatever, that 44 kilohertz should be all we need to theoretically hear what we need to hear. But I think there's some caveats to that. But anyway, let me not keep babbling.
But you're about to see the evidence to back it up. So sit back, relax, and get ready to read some angry comments below. I was introduced to this video back in college by the instructor of my digital audio course.
Yeah, there we go. So Monty from ziff.org or something, he had a video where he really showed a lot about digital audio conversion, and he had a couple other ones that are really good, and they recommended watching. I don't think that he made the claim that 16-bit was going to be enough, but we'll see.
In the video, Monty Montgomery sets up a fully analog system, including an analog signal generator, an analog oscilloscope, and an analog spectrum analyzer. Then he drops a digital audio interface in the middle to convert the signal from analog to digital and then back to analog. If the stair-step myth about digital audio were true...
Sorry, I'm going to pause it again. Sorry. I think some of you guys have just already turned your nose up that he's plugging RCA connectors into some like super cheap ass sound card. And yet, oh man, I'm going to put all my, you guys can fry me and throw all my credibility on the line. Even that setup is so insanely better than what we used to record on in the professional 2-inch reels. Like the frequency response, the bandwidth, the noise, the distortion, it's just so good. I mean, it's RCA, so already people are probably like, oh yeah, no, never mind, this guy's full of crap. But no, it's pretty good.
And then back to analog. If the stair-step myth about digital audio were true, we would see a jagged waveform when the signal is played back from the audio interface and through the analog oscilloscope. That's what I expected to see the first time I watched this video. I thought that a higher sample rate would result in a more accurate representation of the signal. It does make intuitive sense if you think about it. Wouldn't a higher sample rate mean that you could capture the spaces between the samples with more resolution? Well, let's see.
Okay, it's go time. We begin by converting an analog signal to digital, and then right back to analog again with no other steps. The signal generator is set to produce a 1 kilohertz sine wave, just like before. We can see our analog sine wave on our input side oscilloscope. We digitize our signal to 16-bit PCM at 44.1 kilohertz, same as on a CD. The spectrum of the digitized signal matches what we saw earlier and what we see now on the analog spectrum analyzer, aside from its high impedance input being just a smidge noisier. For now, the waveform display shows our digitized sine wave as a stair-step pattern, one step for each sample. And when we look at the output signal that's been converted from digital back to analog, we see it's exactly like the original sine wave. No stair-steps. Okay, 1 kilohertz is still a fairly low frequency. Maybe the stair-steps are just hard to see, or they're being smoothed away. Fair enough. Let's choose a higher frequency, something close to Nyquist, say 15 kilohertz. Now the sine wave is represented by less than 3 samples per cycle, and the digital waveform looks pretty awful. Well, looks can be deceiving. The analog output is still a perfect sine wave, exactly like the original. Let's keep going up. 16 kilohertz. 17 kilohertz. 18 kilohertz. 19 kilohertz. 20 kilohertz. Welcome to the upper limits of human hearing. The output waveform is still perfect. No jagged edges, no drop-off, no stair steps.
Let me clarify some things Monty mentioned in this first clip. He started with a 1 kilohertz sine wave, but human hearing ranges from 20 hertz all the way up to 20 kilohertz. So he increased the frequency until it reached 20 kilohertz, the highest frequency we can hear. You may have heard Monty say a frequency closer to Nyquist. In digital audio, the Nyquist frequency is the highest frequency that can be accurately sampled and recreated by the system. The Nyquist frequency is determined by the sample rate that's being used. A digital audio system can capture and reproduce a signal perfectly and completely as long as the highest frequency content of the signal is less than half the sample rate. So if we wish to reproduce the full range of human hearing from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, we need to use a sample rate that's at least 40 kilohertz. In this example, the system he was using had a sample rate of 44.1 kilohertz, which is the standard for CD quality audio.
All right. Before we go on, this works perfectly as a show for single sine waves. You gotta assume that the signal is band limited before it gets converted. I mean, that's just so crazy important. If you were to do the same experiment with white noise and then try to null the outputs, you're not going to null. And that's because of all the aliasing frequencies that are going to get through. And, well, assuming you were not using a anti-aliasing filter, I think you would still hear it. But the sample rate has to be higher so that you can get that anti-aliasing filter in and block out the frequencies that you can't reproduce. They're still going to be there a little bit because the filters aren't perfect, but they're pretty damn close. So it's important to keep in mind that we're talking about a single sine wave so far right here, which is not necessarily going to mess with the anti-aliasing filter. Real world signals are possibly going to have information that's above the Nyquist frequency.
The signal was still perfectly recreated on the analog oscilloscope. If the stair-step myth were true, that wave would have looked something like this. So where were the stair steps? Well, let's keep watching.
So, where'd the stair steps go? Don't answer, it's a trick question. They were never there. Drawing a digital waveform as a stair step was wrong to begin with. Why? A stair step is a continuous time function. It's jagged and it's piecewise, but it has a defined value at every point in time. A sampled signal is entirely different. It's discrete time. It's only got a value right at each instantaneous sample point, and it's undefined. There is no value at all everywhere in between. A discrete time signal is properly drawn as a lollipop graph. The continuous analog counterpart of a digital signal passes smoothly through each sample point, and that's just as true for high frequencies as it is for low. Now the interesting and not at all obvious bit is there's only one band-limited signal that passes exactly through each sample point. It's a unique solution. So if you sample a band-limited signal and then convert it back, the original input is also the only possible output. And before you say, oh, I can draw a different signal that passes through those points, well, yes, you can, but if it differs even minutely from the original, it contains frequency content at or beyond Nyquist, breaks the band limiting requirement, and isn't a valid solution. So how did everyone get confused and start thinking of digital signals as stair steps? I can think of two good reasons. First, it's easy enough to convert a sampled signal to a true stair step. Just extend each sample value forward until the next sample period. This is called a
Uh-oh, there's no audio at all? Where are... Uh-oh. Oh no, those are fake meters. Yeah, sorry, I was talking about the digital to analog. So this is the way that digital to analog converters work. It's just a simple resistor network. Or that's the basic version. The real version is so more complicated because we have to make it stable and not noisy and take care of a couple things. But for all practical purposes, this idea that there's one and only one possible solution to drawing a line through 2 points in digital audio, assuming you know the bandwidth, assuming you're underneath it, and assuming you know the sample rate, there really is only one way to draw that waveform. And it's not because of some kind of programming thing or anything else. It is a physical property of the universe, and the way you decode this back from digital to analog can be with just a set of resistors. And it's just the way math and the universe works, that's just the only way you can draw it back. I mean, look, the early digital analog converters were just these voltage dividing resistors, you know. It's just absolutely amazing. Like, again, they're not this simple in real life, but yeah, somebody making a breadboard version of a digital analog converter. So anyway, we go on with this.
zero order hold, and it's an important part of how some digital to analog converters work, especially the simplest ones. So, anyone who looks up digital to analog converter or digital to analog conversion is probably going to see a diagram of a stair-step waveform somewhere. But that's not a finished conversion, and it's not the signal that comes out. Second, and this is probably the more likely reason, engineers who supposedly know better, like me, draw stair steps, even though they're technically wrong. It's sort of like a one-dimensional version of fat bits in an image editor. Pixels aren't squares either. They're samples of a two-dimensional function space, and so they're also, conceptually, infinitely small points. Practically, it's a real pain in the ass to see or manipulate infinitely small anything, so big squares it is. Digital stair-step drawings are exactly the same thing. It's just a convenient drawing. The stair-steps aren't really there.
Another component of the stair-step myth has to do with bit depth. Bit depth describes how many digital bits are contained within each sample. Each bit can represent two values, on or off, so each time you add a bit, you double the possible values that can be represented by that sample. Again, intuition might suggest that more bit depth makes for a smoother representation of the amplitude of the signal, leading to a more accurate representation of the original waveform. But as I learned from Monty's video, this isn't actually the benefit of increasing bit depth.
When we convert a digital signal back to analog, the result is also smooth regardless of the bit depth. 24 bits or 16 bits or 8 bits, it doesn't matter. So does that mean that the digital bit depth makes no difference at all? Of course not. Channel 2 here is the same sine wave input, but we quantize with dither down to 8 bits. On the scope, we still see a nice smooth sine wave on channel 2. Look very close and you'll also see a bit more noise. That's a clue. If we look at the spectrum of the signal, aha! Our sine wave is still there unaffected, but the noise level of the 8-bit signal on the second channel is much higher. And that's the difference the number of bits makes. That's it. When we digitize a signal, first we sample it. The sampling step is perfect.
So again, it's probably a little bit too ambitious to say that bit depth doesn't matter at all. And again, if we really want, I can pretty easily make a pathological signal that you probably won't really see in real life, where lower bit depth will, you could even do it at 24 bits, no problem. Just by going up and down in volume a lot. you could end up with a noisier signal by working at a lower bit depth than a higher one. But you know, in reality, you're probably never gonna hear that, especially with, well, the scary part is take a modern song with modern volume wars mastering levels and put it into something like let's see, Reaper's got one. Now I can't do this because somebody's going to DMCA me, but if there's some bit, let's see, there's some kind of bit depth reduction right here, so you could change from 16 bits to 8 bits or whatever. And if you play a song and as you go down in volume, it's kind of crazy how little noise or how little difference you're going to hear. Let me I might have something I can use. Hold on. Something that's not out yet, so I mean, I don't want to make it so it ends up triggering on their thing. Okay. Let me just pull something up here. Okay, I'm gonna throw in this WAV file, and let's find a little spot here.
And stay here. Waking up lost, what the fuck did I do?
Oh,
5 calls, 25 texts, where did I go wrong? Staying out, waiting on the edge, looking out.
yeah. So this is 24.
5 calls, 25 out, waiting on the edge, looking out, waiting on the edge, looking out, waiting on the edge.
Okay, so let's go down to 16 bits.
Waiting on the edge, looking out, waiting on,
Okay, so let's start going down in the bits here and see where we start to hear something.
waiting on the edge, looking out, waiting on the edge, looking out, waiting on the edge, looking out.
So I'm at 8 bits right now, right? This is like old video game music, 8-bit music. Does it really sound any different?
Waiting on the edge,
We go back to 16.
waiting on the edge, looking out, waiting on the edge, looking out,
Okay, let's start going lower now.
waiting on the edge, looking out,
6 bits. 6 bits.
waiting on the edge,
Okay, 4 bits.
waiting on the edge.
Okay, I think you might be starting to hear some noise. Let me turn off and make sure there's no dither. No noise shaping going on. I think at 4 bits you're starting to hear the hiss. Okay, let me go back up.
Waiting on the edge, looking out, waiting on the edge, looking out,
It should start kind of sounding like frying bacon.
waiting on the edge, looking out, waiting on the edge, looking out, waiting on the edge, looking out,
But it's terrifying. At 5 bits, this still sounds pretty much okay. Now, let me go to a quieter part. So here's 16. Let me pull up, turn up Reaper's volume here. The click you're hearing is from not being on a zero crossing. Don't worry about that. I'm going to go down here. Okay, you might be hearing this, okay? 13 bits are probably okay. Let's turn this up. I turn this down? Starting to hear frying eggs. Now 9 bits, you really hear it. 8 bits, you definitely hear it. 7, it's loud. Okay, listen to how distorted and messed up 6 bits is on the quiet part. Let's compare that to 16 bits. Well, watch this. 6 bits. Let me play a loud part.
I say it now, waiting on the edge, looking out, trying to see the end.
Pretty much okay, right? So if you use the commonly accepted wisdom of every bit is worth 6 decibels of dynamic range before the quantization distortion, go on my monitor effects, and let's look at Eulene's loudness meter here.
Waking up lost, what the fuck did I do? Laying on the grass, what a way to wake up. 25 calls, 27 texts, and where did I go wrong?
Okay, so it looks like, you know, what do we have, like 9 decibels, 6 decibels or whatever? You really don't need much. In this part right here, you're gonna need a couple bits. But it's just crazy to think of how we think of this stuff and how it really is. So let me go back to playing this.
Loses nothing, but then we quantize it, and quantization adds noise. The number of bits determines how much noise, and so the level of the noise floor. What does this...
See, that was an easier way. You could just watch the noise. I guess I could have put some kind of spectrum thing up there.
dithered quantization noise sound like? Let's listen to our 8-bit sine wave.
And we already know because I just played it for you, but here we go.
That may have been hard to hear anything but the tone. Let's listen to just the noise after we notch out the sine wave and then bring the gain up a bit because the noise is quiet. Those of you who have used analog recording equipment may have just thought to yourselves, "My goodness, that sounds like tape hiss." Well, it doesn't just sound like tape hiss, it acts like it too. And if we use a Gaussian dither, then it's mathematically equivalent in every way. It is tape hiss. Intuitively, that means that we can measure tape hiss, and thus the noise floor of magnetic audio tape, in bits instead of decibels, in order to put things in a digital perspective. Compact cassettes. For those of you who are old enough to remember them, could reach as deep as 9 bits in perfect conditions.
So there you go. Your cassette was good for 9 bits. With noise reduction, what do they say about 2-inch machines? It's like 12 or 13 bits, right? I think that's right.
Though 5 to 6 bits was more typical, especially if it was a recording made on a tape deck. That's right, your mixtapes were only about 6 bits deep, if you were lucky. The very best professional open-reel tape used in studios could barely hit. Any guesses? 13 bits
13
with
bits,
advanced
see?
noise reduction.
Look at that. I was right. No, the noise reduction does something else too, which you may or may not like. I never really minded it. It seemed okay to me.
And that's why seeing DDD on a compact disc used to be such a big high-end deal.
So the advantage of increased bit depth is a lower noise floor, and therefore an increased dynamic range. But even 16-bit digital audio files have more than enough dynamic range to account for the full dynamic range of human hearing, especially when you consider the environmental noise that's all around us.
Yeah, like the air conditioner blasting way behind me right now.
16-bit digital audio file has a theoretical dynamic range of 96 decibels. First of all, 96 dB SPL is deafeningly loud. If you consider 0 dB SPL to be the quietest sound we can hear, you would need to be listening at an extremely high level to require the full dynamic range of even 16-bit audio. Although, in theory, the full dynamic range of human hearing, between the quietest sound we can hear and the point where it's so loud it's painful, is between 130 and 140 dB. Still, at any reasonable listening level, 96 dB is more than enough when you consider the noise within even the most exceptionally quiet listening environment, let's say with a noise floor of 20 dB SPL. If you still don't believe that 16-bit audio has more dynamic range than we'll ever need, consider that this 96 dB figure is actually quite misleading. It refers to the RMS noise level of the entire broadband signal, not just a narrow band. In fact, the effective dynamic range of 16-bit audio with proper dithering reaches 120 dB. This next quote from a Ziff.org article is so mind-blowing that it made me literally laugh.
Now, still yet, again, don't take too much, because when you're manipulating audio and doing a lot of like compression and stuff like that, it's not all that hard to get into the quantization distortion in the process of mixing. But, you know, our modern DAWs work at 64 bits, so we don't care, right? But whatever that 16-bit quantization error was coming in, you may still be dealing with. So it's you know, it's nice these new converters are 24-bit, but in practice, we're probably getting 20 bits performance out of them. And like he says, the actual environmental noise is probably going to be pretty loud.
Out loud when I read it, so get ready. 120 dB is greater than the difference between a mosquito somewhere in the room and a jackhammer a foot away. Think about that for a second. All this to say, 16-bit 44.1 kilohertz audio is more than enough for playback, even on the very best hi-fi systems. In fact, attempting to play back ultrasonic content by playing a 192 kilohertz file not only takes up 4 times the hard drive space without any audible benefit, but it might actually cause audible distortions that lead to decreased fidelity.
All right, this is a thing that Dan Lavery used to say a lot, that the higher sampling rates could be you're trading speed for accuracy, but they never really spelled that out, and I really want to hear why this is the case, because the higher sampling rate, okay, we all know probably if you're doing this kind of work that aliasing problems that you have in a compressor, in an amp sim, things like that, the more oversampling you can do, the smaller that problem becomes by a lot. So a higher sampling rate when you're working on things, it's definitely gives you an audible benefit. Recording at that higher sample rate, I understand it really shouldn't, with the caveat that at higher sample rates, you can have a much, much, much better anti-aliasing filter on the way in. And that's why I think Dan Lavery was thinking 60 kilohertz is probably ideal. 48 kilohertz, you know, which I'm working at right now, I can't tell if it really sounds any better than 44K, but it makes me a little bit less nervous. So that's usually where I am. And that's usually what people are asking for right now anyway. So, but let's hope that he actually explains this.
I'll leave some resources below so you can do some research on your own. But there are very good reasons.
So nobody does. So look, this is a claim they keep saying. I really want to hear an explanation for this.
Attempting to play back ultrasonic content by playing a 192 kilohertz file not only takes up 4 times the hard drive space without any audible benefit, but it might actually cause audible distortions.
How? How might it actually cause audible distortions? Everybody keeps saying this. Tell me, how does that higher sample rate hurt? And I'm not one of these guys who's telling everybody they got to go record it at 96K. I used to do that in 2000. I don't anymore. I record back at 48K. But I really want to hear how that higher sampling rate can actually hurt.
Without any audible benefit, but it might actually cause audible distortions that lead to decreased fidelity. I'll leave some resources below.
Okay, let's see if it actually shows in those resources. I don't see anything that tells. I know the Ziff ones don't actually get into that. Or they didn't. Let me see. Let me see. Maybe. Okay, here we go. 92 kilohertz digital music files offer no benefits. That's not true. That's not true. I mean, ideally, you're only needing to go to the high sample rates inside your plugins or your DSP processes, but or your nonlinear processes. But you could record at that, and assuming your plugins actually handle that sample rate, it would be the same as oversampling, as far as I can tell, unless there's something in the conversion that messes it up. So let's see if he says they're not quite neutral either. Practical fidelity is slightly worse. The ultrasonics are a liability during playback, but we're going to be filtering those out during playback. Your loudspeaker might distort from a higher sampling rate because of that energy coming out of the that ultrasonic energy. If your speakers can actually feel that energy, then it is changing the energy distribution in your speaker or your headphones or whatever. I don't know if you'd hear it, but it is adding more energy into the system. So I could see it there, but that's not what we're talking. We're talking about recording at that. We would necessarily, I would assume, band limit back down to whatever the target format is. So let's see. The ultrasonics are a liability during playback. I don't care. How would they be a liability in recording? That's what I want to know. Neither audio transducers nor power amplifiers are free of distortion. The distortion tends to increase rapidly at the lowest and highest frequencies. If the same transducer reproduces ultrasonics along with the audible content, any nonlinearity will shift some of the ultrasonic content down into the audible range as an uncontrolled spray of intramodulation distortion products covering the entire audible spectrum. Nonlinearity in a power amplifier will produce the same effect. The effect is very slight, but listening tests have confirmed that both effects can be audible. Again, I'm saying this is a non-starter, unless you're arguing for 96 kilohertz or 192 whatever distribution. Yeah, ultrasonic should be stopped in the amp. Normally that's what all those filtering caps are for, but I could see some of this stuff getting through there. So in theory, this is probably true, but I'm saying we're limiting that stuff before we even leave the system. Let's see. Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, I really don't think that they're gonna tell us. Okay, so here's 16 versus 24. Okay, so let's see. It's true that 16-bit linear PCM audio does not quite cover the entire theoretical dynamic range of a human ear in ideal conditions. Also, there are and always will be reasons to use more than 16 bits in recording and production. Yes, there are reasons to use more than 16 bits. None of that is relevant to playback. Here, 24-bit audio is as useless as 192 kilohertz sampling. Yes, I agree completely. 16 bits for playback should cover everything you're ever going to need. I mean, I guess if you have some blaster crazy thing where you can hear some. I mean, remember, after all this editing and stuff, the noise, the quantization error probably isn't going to be at its floor. Especially you got compressors and everything like that. It's probably going to be higher than the theoretical limit at 16 bits. It's probably not going to be higher than the audible limit when you're running 24-bit editing and stuff, especially you get 64-bit processes and these things. Yeah, wouldn't those issues be negated during mastering? It should be. I mean, unless you're specifically mastering for 192 kilohertz, which, I don't know. That sounds crazy. But yeah, I'm not super thrilled about the way they said some of this, I think. But here we go. When does 24-bit matter? Professionals use 24-bit samples in recording and production for headroom, noise floor, and convenience reasons. 16 bits is enough to span the real hearing range with room to spare. It does not span the entire possible signal range of audio equipment. The primary reason to use 24 bits when recording is to prevent mistakes, rather than being careful to center 16-bit recording, risking clipping if you guess too high and adding noise if you guess too low. 24 bits allows an operator to set an approximate level and not worry too much about it. That's why I say 24 bits allows you to set a ridiculous amount of buffering, and still yet we keep pushing them up near the top, but we don't need to. You know, when you hear somebody saying minus 15, that's what they're aiming for. Nothing wrong with that, man. You're fine, absolutely fine. Let's see. Missing the optimal gain setting by a few bits has no consequences, and effects that dynamically compress the recorded range have a deep floor to work with, and that's where you get nailed on a compressor. Think about 96 decibels down, and your signal is let's say a cymbal that starts out at like minus 6 dB or something, let's say, and it drops while you can still hear it down into like the 60s or 70s even, and now you stick a compressor on the drum bus, and that thing's been boosted along with the noise to maybe minus 40. All of a sudden, you're going to get into the quantization error range. Even the 16 bits, though, it's kind of hard to do. But especially with modern loudness wars levels, you can definitely have it happen. Yeah, see, this is what I was saying. An engineer also requires more than 16 bits during mixing and mastering. Modern workflows may involve literally thousands of effects and operations. The quantization noise and noise floor of a 16-bit sample may be undetectable during playback, but multiplying that noise by a few thousand times eventually becomes noticeable. 24 bits keeps the accumulated noise at very low level. Once the music is ready to distribute, there's no reason to keep it at more than 16 bits. And there we go. So this was a really cool video. It kind of took a little bit of digging on the outside, and now, since I got you guys here, I have a couple little problems, and just wanna play you something. All right, here are more Helix 3.6 HX Edit 3.61 shenanigans, and at this point, this product's almost unusable. Like, you can play it as it is, but copying and pasting presets is just a nightmare. So I'm going to show you. I'm going to copy this, load this preset up right here. Check out the level on number 2 is at 0. Number 4, snapshot 4 is at plus 15. Okay, I'm going to reload it. Copy it. I'm just going to paste it up here. So now let's look at number 2. Yep, it's at 0 like it should be. Number 4, 0.5. This is, I mean, all these levels keep getting changed. Things just keep getting changed. This is really stressful. Sorry. Okay, so if you didn't get what that was about, Helix's new version 3.6 has some bugs of parameters just randomly changing. This isn't the first time Helix has done this, but it's also happening on Helix Native. It's happening regardless of all that. I just want to talk to you about software for a little bit. And this is usually the regular pattern of my life. I find a bug in software, and the first response on forums is usually you're doing something wrong. So I'm okay. Let's make it so that everybody can test this. And then most of the people who said you're doing something wrong refuse to actually use your test that you provided them. If there's ever been an actual case of gaslighting in the world, it's usually when people report software bugs, and it's just amazing how the wagons get circled and everything, and it takes quite a while, and then all of a sudden everybody sees it, and then maybe, nobody ever apologizes to you. Who am I kidding? But at least it reaches the manufacturer, and this is one of those ones where it's super frustrating because I think I'm crazy. I'm like, wait, I must be doing something wrong, and by the time you get it into the forums to share it with people, you pretty much tested it yourself. But again, you will get nailed over and over, and people will tell you you're wrong, you're using it wrong. It's not actually doing that. Yeah, the copy is it's changing the values, not only that, it's crazier than that. Like right now, I could pull up an old bundle that I made before this version, pull it up, and when I first pull it up, the values are going to be correct. And then when I switch back to it, from switching away to switch back, the values are going to be changed again. So that means there's got to be, I mean, at least for the native version, there's got to be something wrong in the config files or something like that. But I just want to say, when people see bugs, don't just, it's almost like that "let me Google that for you" thing. They're there because they already Googled it, and they want your expert help. And software bugs can be notoriously difficult to reproduce and find. And supporting software, I know how it is. Like the customer will have a problem and I can't reproduce it. It's really nerve-wracking, but don't just assume that the person is not actually encountering that bug. So I'm deep in the pod and envy the Helix, but looking at getting Katana 100 try. Hey, I know a lot of people who own giant multi-effects units, but they set the Katana up for the sounds they want to go play, and they just pick up that tiny little thing and go play, and they're done. The Katana 100, the 1x12 one, it's tiny and it's light, man, and it sounds pretty good. Like, yeah, so I was actually trying to pick one up. I was gonna take the speaker out and throw a Celestion F12 in there, and then use that as a power cab for my Helix. But no, those are awesome. All right, so now I got to go back to I have a mix I got to work on, but first of all, I am gonna do some more repros for this Helix error. And I mean, the craziest thing is I went back to 3.5. I went to the version before, and even then my settings are still not working. So I think there's something just drastically wrong. So I gotta take a look at some more stuff.